Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey Show. Our great interviews continue this week with today's guest, Columbus Blue Jackets broadcaster Steve Mears. Steve, how's the offseason been so far?
It's been pretty uneventful on my end. I think there have been some stories on the team's end that have been in the news cycle, of course, but it's nice to get a little break and wish the season had been longer and the Jackets had made the playoffs, but they came awfully close. And now it's flying by. Before you know it, we're going to be getting into training camp, started the season a little bit earlier now with the 84 game schedule. So it's always exciting, but it's important to rest up and get ready for the grind that is the NHL season and all the travel that goes with it. But there, and the thing about working here and being in this city and the organization is like I look forward to September so much. Even when the season ended, I'm looking ahead. Okay, well, how many more months is it until we can get going again? And I just think it's because it's such a wonderful organization and just great people that I work with.
Absolutely, yeah. It goes by quick, but like you said, Columbus came very close to the playoffs last year, and those fans are ready to get going again. If anybody hasn't been to Columbus yet, Columbus is a hockey market. Make no questions about it. But Steve, I know you've been in the industry for quite a few years now, and got to see the roles from different teams, working with NHL Network as well. Take me all the way back to you going through school and kind of breaking into the industry. What was your goals going through school, and what was that first role in the game for you?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do at a really young age, probably like 10 years old. I just thought broadcasting was the coolest job to bring these games to an audience and tell the story of a season and the athletes that are participating. And the best part was you got in for free. That's all I ever wanted was to get in for free just once. So growing up being a hockey fan and just a sports fan in general, I thought that was the avenue that I wanted to take. And because I knew that in advance, I was able to pick a school that I knew would be great for broadcasting, had a track record, gave younger students opportunities, hands-on experience, getting on the air. So I chose Bowling Green, which wasn't too far away from my home in Western Pennsylvania. And it turned out to be the greatest 4 years I could have ever asked for. Got on the air doing play-by-play as a freshman, all 4 years, did a bunch of games, a bunch of other things. And they just gave me the chance to build that foundation and build the skill set so I was ready when it was time to apply for a job or ultimately get a big break and you get to work in the NHL. Because of that foundation, which started at Bowling Green, I was able to take that experience and then apply it as a professional. And then and somewhat, at least my route, and there's no one correct way to do this, but my route was almost like a player. You start in college and then you go to the minors and you work your way up and to go to Shreveport, Louisiana to call minor league hockey, packing up the car after I had graduated from PG and driving down, no clue what I was going to get myself into. But that turned out to be the greatest 4 years of my life. I mean, just some of the greatest friends that I've ever had that I still keep in touch with, players, staff members, fans. It was so special. And then that was kind of like getting my master's in sports because I'm doing, as you know, and a lot of the audience knows, you work in minor league sports. You're doing a lot more than broadcasting. You're wearing many hats. You're doing the game notes, the team promos, the travel, some sales, some marketing, school appearances, you name it. And that was a crash course in what it means to work in the sports business. And then 5%, 10% of the job was the actual announcing. So, but I was very thankful for that experience of all those other facets. And now lucky enough to work in the NHL where broadcasting is the majority, that is the primary part of my job, even though there are other aspects of it and being a part of the team and being a face of the team. But now at this level, the real job is the actual broadcasting, which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of great lessons in that response alone there. And one that I want to touch on, Steve, because I think it comes up a lot of times for me with students is willingness to move and relocate for a role there. And I know you've had a couple different stops around the NHL where you've got to experience different cities, but tell me about going down to Shreveport there. I don't know if you'd ever been to Louisiana. What was the decision in heading down there and knowing, like you said, hey, this is the career I want. I'm going to stop at nothing to make it happen.
Yeah, I knew nobody and had never been to Shreveport, never been to the South, never been to Louisiana. But you take that leap, and those people I keep in touch with more than any of my stops. Those are the people that I am closest with and I keep in touch with the most. Like when we travel with the Blue Jackets and I go to Calgary or Vancouver or Toronto or Dallas, and I've got friends, a lot of them are ex-players who are living in those markets, and they're such dear friends, and I'm so thankful to have met them. But I do remember going to like a job fair, and this was like when I was about a senior at Bowling Green, and got some great advice from a guy who was at the time the AHL announcer in Cleveland. And I said, "What's the key to getting one of these jobs starting out? I'm going to be graduating here in the spring." And he said, "Steve, are you single? Yes. Are you willing to move anywhere? Yes. Are you willing to work for peanuts? Yes. Then you're perfect." So I don't know if you have to have all three of those things, but definitely a willingness to move and relocate and go where the jobs are. I think that's really important. And I made 18,000 bucks. But I was as happy as could be. The team had a lot of perks and took care of housing and some bills and things, cable and all that, dry cleaning. We had golf. We had all kinds of little perks along the way. And I didn't need much. I was just a 22-year-old kid. So aside from some gambling money going to the local riverboat casinos there in Shreveport. So I didn't need a whole lot. We got a lot of perks working there, kind of a big fish in a small pond. The team was really popular. And I just am so thankful that I landed there. There are a lot of places you could go if you're willing to move anywhere. There were a couple other positions out there, and like I said, there's no one set way. I know a lot of people who've started in kind of TV news or sports anchoring and have parlayed that into a job doing NHL play by play, or maybe they just get in the door with an organization and work their way up from there. Maybe they start off in the marketing or social media or radio hosts, and you just kind of work your way up the rungs of the ladder. So no one particular way that's fit for everybody, but that's the route I took. And 20 plus years ago, it was internet message boards. It was going on. I remember distinctly sitting in my college apartment, seeing Shreveport, Louisiana, the Mud Bugs. That was the team, and their announcer Brandon Walker was leaving to go to Nashville to work for the Predators, where he still is to this day. And I knew there's a ripple effect. You see this opening, someone gets promoted. There's a chain reaction, so that must mean an opening there in Shreveport, and immediately got my resume out there. Back then it was a CD with my play by play. And another great lesson was just how small the sports world is, and the hockey world specifically. I was in the running. They received my resume and CD demo, and it ultimately turned out I always listed my references, and I still think that's really important because you never know who knows somebody. It's this connect the dots game that gets played. And sure enough, the general manager of that Shreveport team went to college with one of my references, who was the Bowling Green assistant coach. So right away, it's like, they're like, what are the odds of that? He calls him up. Dave Smith gives me a good word and recommendation to get that position, and I ended up getting the job, and the rest is history. But I think that's a pretty good anecdote about how small the sports world is. And especially at the lower levels, you've got to be constantly trying to cultivate these relationships and these connections, because that goes for any field, but especially in the sports world and especially in the hockey world. It is such a tiny world where everybody knows someone. And that was a game I was always playing in the off season when my time was wide open. I was like, okay, well, here's our equipment manager. He used to work in this place. Maybe he knows the head coach who was there. Like, here's our general manager. He used to work here. Let's see. So it's this connect the dots game that I was always trying to play. And ultimately, it was that game that led me to get my big break, which was a job at the New York Islanders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's we're in a people-centric industry, right? And it's a small world, and you have to be always networking, meeting new people, and connecting those dots, like you said there. What was that transition like from the CHL at the time there in Shreveport, Steve, to the New York Islanders, going up to not only the NHL but one of its bigger markets here in New York? What was that transition like for yourself?
Yeah, it was just kind of the ignorance of youth. I really didn't know anything, but when you're that young and stupid, it doesn't really matter, thankfully. So I guess the enormity of it was completely unbeknownst to me, but I'd never been to the New York area before, never been to New York City. Now, Long Island is certainly different than working for the Rangers or the Yankees. Long Island is more suburban, and that's the more blue collar team of all the New York metro area teams. So there's a charm in that, and there's obviously a rich history with that organization. So it's really special to go there. And I had a lot to learn. I mean, now, just as I said earlier, you go from broadcasting's 5% of the job to now it's like 95% of the job. And I had a lot to learn, but thankfully I was surrounded by some of the greatest ever to do it. My partner, Chris King, who I'm still such good friends with, um, Howie Rose and Billy Jaffe were doing the TV. It was heavy division schedules back then. So we would play the Devils 8 times. Doc Emmerich was doing the Devils broadcasts with Chico Resch. Rangers had Kenny Albert and Sam Rosen. I would see these guys so much. It was heavy, heavy division schedule back then, 20 years ago. So I would see them constantly, especially those guys that were in the area. So you'd see them a lot and just try to pick their brains, be a sponge around all of them, especially Howie and Billy, because they were so experienced and so good. And I just learned so much, constantly trying to learn from them, because you just kind of pick your heroes, you pick the people that you look up to, and you try to absorb as much as you can from the very best. And I'm still doing that to this day. I still watch the Super Bowl and watch Mike Tirico or Joe Buck or Al Michaels or Bob Costas, like all the very, very best to do it. And it's a constant learning process. It isn't like you ever arrive, especially not in this field where, I've probably had like 5 good games at least in my view, in 20 years. It's a constant honing of the craft and the art form that is play by play and broadcasting. So I'm still doing that and just trying to fine tune. And I hope I'll never think that I've arrived. I could be 80 years old and you're still trying to evolve with the times and try to evolve in your style and just get better and better. So I was lucky when I started out, even though it was the NHL. Could have been overwhelming at the time, but I didn't really think of it that way. And I tried to act like I belonged, and it was a very good stepping stone for all the troubles that the organization had around that time. And ultimately, they cut the radio broadcast and went to a simulcast, and I was out of a job. So it was like, right away. Like, am I going to get a break like that ever again? Am I going back to Shreveport? And it turned out to be one of the greatest things. There's another good lesson is that you think it's an awful thing and you're in this malaise, and we all get laid off, especially if you're in broadcasting. It's all, we're seeing that, especially in this turbulent time. So those things do happen, but every time that's happened to me, I've looked back and thought ends up being the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, even at the time, even though at the time you may not realize it.
Yeah, one door closes and another door opens, right? And again, the people that you meet and got to meet through all the travel and division rivalries there as well. You got to move back closer to home for the next stop there with the Pittsburgh Penguins. What was it like, A, moving back close to home after being down in Shreveport and then over in New York? And then B, just what was that experience like around such a successful and I mean, fan crazy market in Pittsburgh there.
Yeah, and it was one that I was familiar with, just growing up a Penguin fan and growing up in that area. It was nice to be close to home, and I was very thankful that the Islander situation. They go to the simulcast, so I'm out of work. And at the time, the Penguins were looking for kind of a jack of all trades type host, and we're launching a new radio network. And the timing really couldn't have worked out any better. So it helped me get my foot in the door with the Penguins organization. And I loved living there just because I was so familiar. And it was the closing of the igloo, the opening of the new building. I grew up going to games in the igloo. It was really special those 3 years there doing that. But always had aspirations of like, what's the next thing? What's the next step? How do I get back into the play-by-play chair when these jobs just do not come open that often? And I was able to take that and get to NHL Network from there and got to live in New York City, which was always a bucket list thing. Having lived on Long Island, I like to go and have an apartment in New York City and live that life. And for 5 years to live on the Upper West Side, and I still look back and like I can't believe I got to do that. And that's where I met my wife, and just very fortunate that it all worked out that way. So yeah, it's like there's all these twists and turns. I never would have thought I was going to be a host. Like I was all set on the play by play. Like that's what I want to do. I didn't really have any interest when I started out, like kind of sitting at a desk and being an anchor. And that's what I was at NHL Network every day for 5 years, pretty much. But it was it was awesome. Talk about the best seat for a hockey fan. I mean, I got to interview Wayne Gretzky and Gary Bettman and Patrick Waugh and Teemu Selanne and all these people that I looked up to. So I got that chance and got to be on the ice when a few Stanley Cups were awarded. Did get to do some play-by-play with that role and World Juniors and a few Stanley Cup Finals with NHL International. So that turned out to be so fantastic, even though it wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing. But it was a different skill set. And I always said it was like having a game every day. It was like a new show. You never knew what was going to come across your desk, which coach was going to get fired, which trade was going to be made, and what the storylines were going to be. But to sift through all of that and put a 2 hour show together and be on live TV every day for 2 hours, that was a real crash course in the whole television game.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting role, right? Going from the team side to then covering, like you said, every game, every day, every team with the NHL Network there. And like you said, no two paths are the same, and you never know where it's going to lead. You mentioned the Upper West Side. I'm on the Upper East Side here right now. Never thought from small town Ontario I'd be in New York, very similar to you said. But you follow the opportunities, right? And the people that you meet, the opportunities that open up, you got to follow which ones you feel are best for you. Who are some of the people that helped you kind of learn the ropes of the anchor desk work side of things there at NHL Network? Because, like you said, it is a big difference from the multiple hats you wore in Shreveport and the play-by-play and broadcasting you've done to that point.
Well, my partner EJ Raddick was a big help, and he's a good friend to this day. Talk to him all the time. He's still there at NHL Network doing outstanding work. And then kind of the same thing, only it's a different skill set. Who are the best hosts? And watching them when we ended up moving to MLB Network and out to Secaucus, New Jersey. First half of my time, we were right in the city, NHL headquarters. Then they merged NHL Network and MLB Network, and we moved to Secaucus. So I'm taking the train out there every day. And now you're around a real TV studio and production, like a real network that is just a machine like MLB Network is. So around there, I'm around Matt Vasgersian and Greg Amsinger and Paul Severino and all these great on-air people that have done it for a long time. And even though I did some baseball and I love baseball, even though they weren't traditional hockey hosts, I was able to take so much from those people that worked there and just awesome resources, and that was really special to be around that environment, to see not just being a baseball fan. You got all the legendary analysts who are walking around like Pedro Martinez and John Smoltz, but just to see a real television network and how all these moving parts are put together, and it really is a team effort. Even game broadcasts, it's a team sport. It is a team effort, and you have to be a good team player in any walk of life, but especially if you're going to do television. Like I think about our games that we do here in Columbus. You got a producer, director, graphics, tape person. You've got a whole legion of people working the cameras and all these others behind the scenes. There are people on the team side that are helping to make the broadcast possible, especially as far as sponsorships go. It is a Herculean effort to put on one single television broadcast. You see Jody Shelley and I on camera, but there are so many other people behind the scenes that make those broadcasts possible. So you got to be a team player. You got to work with everybody. And I think of it kind of like a player in the NHL. I want to be the best teammate that I can be. If there's something, it's not about me. If I can do something that's going to help our graphics person or our producer or director, and the goal is Dave Strader, the late Dave Strader. He told me that everyone has the same goal: is to have the best show possible. And he was the ultimate team player. And there was someone that I really looked up to and still do to this day. Just being that team player, I think that would be the best compliment that I could get. That I was there for the group as a whole, and in unison, we put a nice product out there.
Yeah, no, it truly takes an army to make an NHL production and an NHL game happen. And you touched on Columbus there, and your work with Jody Shelley. And for my money, one of my favorite broadcasts to watch is with you guys there. But tell me a little bit about the preparation on a game day, Steve, and maybe even before a game day. What goes into preparing for the Islanders are coming to town? You've got a game that you're calling. What's your sort of routine or process look like to make sure that you're as well prepared for a game as you can be?
Yeah, I actually did it. It was 2 seasons ago. I did it on Instagram. If you scroll back, I did kind of a day in the life of on a road game, and it was a game in Toronto, which is one of my favorite cities to broadcast from. So you could take a look at that kind of a visual version. But the most important thing in any type of broadcasting is preparation. You have to be prepared. So it starts the day before, and watching the Islanders' last game, for example, if we're going to use them and just diving into what the storylines are. Nowadays, there is such a plethora of information. It's almost too much. It's too much stuff to sift through. There's podcasts, there's articles every day. There are sound clips. If you go on the team's website, there are press conferences, and it gets too much stuff. There's analytics now, so you can go and see like what are the Islanders and the Blue Jackets doing as far as the advanced stats go. It's almost too much. You only have so many hours in the day, and you have 84 games now to prepare for. So you have to really pick and choose and try to find out what's going to put you in the best position to succeed and what's the most relevant information. So I'm going in, taking a look at the opposing team, definitely like watching their previous game, getting the numbers in my head and the names, the pronunciations. What are they talking about on their show? They'll nail all the storylines. So I want to know what is pertinent going into their next game against us. And then there's a lot of things that go on, going to practice here in Columbus, going to the morning skate on the game day, talking to the players, talking to the coaches, and then coming home in the afternoon, let's say if it's a 7 o'clock game, and just spending hours making these charts that I'd like to do it by hand. It's just the whole roster, who's going to be in the lineup that night, background information, recent trends. This guy's got a 5 game point streak. This guy's having a career year. This is a kid who just got called up from the American Hockey League. This one's starting in goal. Um, all those things, and just trying to be as prepared as possible. And then you hope that it's a great game and you don't need to use the majority of that stuff and it's all fluff. But we don't control that. So it could be 10-0, and you better have some material because it could be a long night. I have absolutely no control over what happens. The Jackets could go 0-84 this year. Certainly hope that doesn't happen. I bet it won't. But you just don't know. You don't know if there's going to be a big delay when the glass is broken and you got to fill. You don't know who's going to have the game of his life. This fourth liner on the opposing team or the Jackets could score 5 goals. And when it comes to applying for jobs and that pathway and everything that I talked about earlier, there's no one size fits all when it comes to preparing for a game. But I do know I want to have the most pertinent information. I want it easily accessible in front of me because you don't have time to look down and stare a hole into your sheet because the game is so fast now. And I do really enjoy watching the team's previous game. I think that's a huge help for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might be a bit of a naive question, Steve, but I'm always curious when it comes to building up your voice in the crescendo of action and knowing when to paint a picture and tell a story versus be quiet and let the play speak for itself. Are those skills that just come from reps and being around the game, or are those things that maybe you and Jody sit down and talk about or think about after a game and say, maybe I should add something in here, or I didn't need to add this here. Walk me through that a little bit, just in terms of kind of building up the skill of painting a picture and calling a game.
Yeah, well, the good thing is on TV versus radio, there isn't a whole lot of painting because the picture exists. That's why I love radio, actually, is because that art of painting that picture for a radio audience is really fun. But one element, especially post game, that I didn't include in the previous answer was going back and watching your work over again. And I do that all the time. Very important to see, okay, just to point out some of the things that you just outlined. Like, yeah, I could have been a little better there, could have laid out a little more here. And it's never perfect. And I am the harshest critic by far of myself, but it's important to do that and just to even take another day or two and just like have your eyes a little more fresh and ears, and you're going back and watching it. Even like here in the summertime, I have a bunch of them on my DVR. I sometimes go back and random game from February where you have a completely different lens now as you're watching it. And I do enjoy going back, and like some of it's good, some of it's okay, some of it is not good, some call might be a little clunky. It's a long season, and you're always striving for the perfect broadcast, even though it never happens. But yeah, a lot of it is feel. A lot of it, just as you said, experience and feel. And the best ones, Bob Cole, we can talk about the crescendo and building the drama through his voice, his instrument that he's using there. I've always thought he was one of the best, and all the greats that are out there and in the past that have done games. I admired Jim Houston for so long, especially being an American kid and the video games that he would narrate, and then Doc Emmerich, especially with the days of NBC and the voice of hockey in the United States, and Gary Thorne. I mentioned Dave Strader earlier, and so many of them. Bob Cole was very lucky at Bowling Green because it was close enough to the border so I could get Hockey Night in Canada in
Yeah.
the late 90s, early 2000s. And like, it might as well have been something from Mars. I mean, I was so thankful. Like, this is the Hockey Night in Canada. Everyone else going out on a Saturday night. And I would stay in and watch the Senators against the Maple Leafs in the early 2000s at 7 o'clock and listen to Bob Cole call those games because I just thought it was such a privilege. Like, we're not that far from Windsor, Ontario, and like to be able to watch this was so special. So I was like, BG being that close to the border, we got Red Wings games, we got Blue Jackets games, we got ESPN, and we got CBC. So I had hockey nonstop in the dorm and in my apartment, and right around that time, I remember the more advanced computers were coming out, and you had more ways to access radio broadcasts. So I'd go into like the radio sports organization office in West Hall, which no longer exists. And I would, like, in the middle of the night, just go in there and take the key, go in and just listen. This was a novel concept. Now it's commonplace, but you'd go on NHL.com back then and tune into the Calgary Flames radio broadcast. That might as well have been from Saturn or Jupiter. Right? It was so, I'm listening to Peter Maher call these games in Calgary, Alberta at the Saddle Dome. Never heard this before growing up in the United States. And it was a novel concept, and now it's ubiquitous, as we know. But it was so special, and just I think those little things along the way, and just absorbing all of that, helped me to develop my style, which is this conglomerate of all these different names that I've been mentioning.
Yeah, there's a lot of legends in our game. We're very lucky and thankful for that. And for anybody who wants to maybe hopefully become one of those legends one day, Steve, the last question that I always ask here to wrap things up is, what's the best piece of career advice that you could give somebody looking to end up in a similar career as yourself?
I mean, there's so many little lessons along the way. I like all these little nuggets. I could give you a long list. I mean, I gave you a couple of examples, and I've lived through a couple of them where I've lost jobs that I really cherished, and it's turned out to be the greatest thing I could have ever asked for in both cases. And now to be here in Columbus in this unbelievable city and great organization, I'm just so appreciative. So that's the biggest thing. There are going to be tribulations, there are going to be twists and turns along the way, and you may think this is awful, but it turns out to be the greatest door opening for you. And the one common trait of all successful people in all walks of life is resilience. Not everyone's going to be smart. Not everyone's going to be 6'4". Not everyone's going to have money. Not everyone's going to have a background and maybe a relative who worked in the business, or like, not everyone's going to have all these traits. But if you're going to be successful, you're probably going to be resilient in any walk of life. So that really stands out. And then just not being negative. And I said, I'm the harshest critic of me. I'm 100% guilty of this. But just eliminating those negative thoughts. You hear a lot of think positively, think positively. And yeah, positive thinking can help you quite, and a lot of times does. But the flip side of that is negative thinking always works. If you think negatively, it will 100% affect what you're doing. So, yeah, you can think positive, and sometimes that does work. Negative thinking always will work, and that's what you have to try to avoid. So, I try to think as positively as I can, and try to eliminate some of the negative distractions, because I know it'll affect my performance and my approach to the job. I'm unbelievably blessed to be able to do this. I mean, it's just now coming up on 20 years doing this in the NHL with various roles, and just been so unbelievably fortunate along the way. And I just try not to lose that perspective, but um, not thinking negatively as opposed to just saying think positively. I think there's a big difference there. And then being resilient, which is a characteristic that is so common among all the successful people, and especially in the broadcasting world, because in this turbulent time, if there's any young broadcaster that's listening, we know this is a turbulent time. The landscape is ever changing. Big announcement just today about the league and taking over several teams broadcast, including the Blue Jackets. So this world with the cord cutting and regional television, and even on the radio side, even on the national TV side, the landscape is ever evolving and changing underneath people's feet. And you have to be resilient, and you have to be ready for a couple of knockdowns, but you'll get back up and you will thrive, and it will make you stronger. And ultimately, it'll develop that thick skin, and it will make you stronger. So I'm very thankful for, especially the two big ones that I've had to deal with. They've turned out to be absolute blessings.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice, and like you said, the landscape is ever changing, but like we said throughout the conversation, Steve, resilient people who work their butts off, continue to learn and try new things and improve and hone in their skills. There's always a place for them in the game. So, truly appreciate your time, your insights here, Steve, and for everybody listening and watching. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Working in Hockey Show. We'll see you again next week.